Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Rancher 2.5 launch online meetup. This one is entitled Streamlined Cloud Native Application Delivery on Kubernetes at Any Scale. So who's who? My name is Tom Corway. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Rancher, and I'll be your host. Then I will hand over, once I've done the sort of intro stuff and the housekeeping, I'll hand over to my esteemed colleague, Keith Basil, who's our VP of Edge Solutions. And then after Keith, he will hand over to my equally esteemed colleague, Bill Maxwell, who will be placing his faith in the demo gods. And after the demo, then we're all going to jump on for Q&A, and our good friend and colleague, Adrian Goins, is going to be joining us for that as well. So it's going to be fun. So first things first, and I'm just going to go through a few slides. If you've been to one of these meetups before, you probably will have seen some of these before. This is a meetup, or a meetup, I should say, not a webinar. So, well, what does that mean? Webinars are generally, 45 minutes long. They're kind of product pitches, fairly sort of tightly executed. And they're basically trying to sell you products. And of course, there's the commercial sort of motivation for most of these things. But these online meetups are much more informal. There's much more emphasis placed on interaction with the audience. We really, really encourage your questions. There is a questions panel which you can use to ask a question at any time. We'll probably, most of the questions will probably be left until the end, but we may sort of jump in during the course of the event with pertinent questions as we go on. But there really are no bad questions, and we will endeavour to answer as many as we possibly can. Sometimes, that can mean that this can extend over, maybe an hour and a half or so. We'll see how we go. And quite importantly, things will break. Be patient. That's particularly true of demo stuff. Just things happen, and connectivity problems happen, all the rest of it. If that does happen, just be patient. We'll be back and we'll try and get things sorted out. We also like to do this as well with these meetups to try and get some visibility of the people who've joined. There's often many hundreds of people joining, so it's great to see your faces on Twitter. If you want to join the conversation on Twitter, just post a picture of yourself. Say what you're doing, and then it's hashtag Rancher Meetup, and you can see who your fellow meetup attendees are. A couple of, one plug I think as well is for the Slack community, Rancher's Slack community at slack.rancher.io. It is now, I think, about 20,000 users. It's very, very active. If you are a free user or a paying customer, it's available for everybody to use, for you to connect with like-minded people who are interested in the same topics that you are around Rancher and Kubernetes. We sort of warmly encourage you to join that. Right, so the agenda. So I'll do a very, very quick sort of company update. First of all, a couple of shameless plugs for events that are coming up pretty soon as well. Then I'll hand over to Keith, who will talk about Rancher 2.5 and give an overview of the sort of the headline new capabilities and try and put them in some sort of context. Then the demo, and then the Q&A. So company update. A couple of months ago, you likely heard that we were going to be acquired by SUSE. That's still ongoing. There's all sorts of sort of regulatory sort of things that need to happen, and we're still expecting that to close before the end of the year. We're very excited about it. I think the opportunity to work with some of the guys at SUSE, a much larger company, huge number of resources, it can only be a good thing for Rancher. We're super excited about it. And everybody, we were just talking about it before we came on, everybody we've met so far has been just fantastic and super friendly, and yeah, it's going to be great. The other thing that you may have missed possibly in the news is that K3S, which is our lightweight Kubernetes distribution, that became the first Kubernetes distribution to join the CNCF as a sandbox project, which is super exciting. It's already massively popular, and we've been tracking the adoption figures recently, and they just sort of hockey sticked up into the stratosphere. we really think that the future for K3S and the future of Rancher with K3S is extremely bright. And Keith and Bill will be going into detail about how Rancher 2.5 really leverages the potential of K3S. Other bits and bobs. This was pretty cool. We always like the guys at Forrester. In 2018, they recognized Rancher as a leader in their enterprise container platform software services. Bit of a mouthful. New Wave report. That's been very, very good for Rancher, and we've developed a great relationship with those guys. And we're very pleased to say that in their latest Forrester Wave report, which has now actually changed its name to multi-cloud container development platforms, which I think is probably quite significant actually. Rancher is still very much in the mix, alongside some very much larger companies, including IBM, Red Hat, Google is a new entrant actually with Anthos, and also VMware with their Tansy product is kind of on the cusp of leaders and strong performers. So we're very excited about that. You can actually download the full report from our website, so I do encourage you to go and have a look if you are interested. One of the questions that I think is important for new people in particular coming to Rancher is why are our customers choosing Rancher over competitors like Red Hat, VMware, Anthos, and so forth. And some people will look at this slide and think that since we do so much in Rancher, this doesn't really do us a lot of justice, just boiling it down to one sort of simple differentiator. But at the end of the day, you can really do that. You can boil it down to the simple differentiating statement, which is Rancher treats Kubernetes as a true industry standard for computing. And as a result, we built our product so that it's designed to manage any Kubernetes distribution. Whereas our competitors, who are obviously much bigger companies, they already have existing infrastructure businesses to protect. So whatever our competitors do to develop their product, they do so for the primary purpose of advancing their own infrastructure products, whether it's Google, IBM Red Hat, or VMware. Now, our competitors are going to say that, or some of them are going to say that they manage Kubernetes clusters or any Kubernetes clusters as well. They'll say, okay, we'll do a demo, look at that icon there, there's an EKS cluster there in Tanzu, whatever. But the way that these guys do it is similar to the way that we did it maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And they treat EKS, for example, as nothing more than a dumb Kubernetes cluster. And while they're doing that, we've advanced Rancher, particularly with this release, to provide full lifecycle management for EKS, which enables our customers to take a full advantage of all the native capabilities within EKS from Rancher itself. So as they adopt Rancher, they will never have to make the hard trade-off of having to abandon any of the native EKS capabilities that they want. It's really, if you're boiling it down to a simple differentiator, it's this. Right. So before we get in into the meat and potatoes of Rancher 2.5, just a quick sort of brief overview of our sort of recipe for running Kubernetes at scale, production grade Kubernetes at scale. We call this the cube cake. It's made up of a few sort of layers. The first one at the bottom is the certified Kubernetes, supporting any certified Kubernetes distribution. We've got RKE here for data center, but honestly, there are lots of other distributions which work very well with Rancher in the data center. And of course, we've got K3S, that super popular lightweight Kubernetes distribution that's was designed for edge deployments primarily, but these days we're actually seeing a lot of K3S being used in sort of dev and testing environments as well. And then of course we have always treated cloud hosted Kubernetes, particularly the primary ones, EKS, AKS, and GKE, as first-class citizens, and we'll be going into some depth later on about how that really has ramped up in terms of the functionality around EKS, which I've already mentioned. And then sitting on top of that, as the sort of Kubernetes management platform, Rancher itself, is made up of a few layers. The first one is simplified cluster operations and infrastructure management. Doing the cluster templating, doing the monitoring, the node pool management, provisioning clusters and lifecycle and so forth. And then sitting on top of that, you have security and authentication, policy enforcement, and governance. And certainly the security and authentication was one of the reasons why a lot of people come to Rancher in the first place. It's super easy to integrate your Kubernetes environment with your existing, Active Directory of whatever it is you're using within your organization, and doing that through Rancher. But also, out of the box, you get all sorts of CIS benchmarking capabilities, scanning capabilities, now OPA, a fantastic RBAC model as well, auditing, monitoring, and so forth. And then maybe this diagram's changed for those of you who've seen it before. We've just sort of put applications on top. I think we're beginning to focus our story higher up the stack. We've now got platform services and developer services, and we're being a bit more explicit about the value that Rancher delivers to those particular layers of the cake. So platform services, the build and run capability, the Helm-based Rancher catalog, having push-button deployment of Istio Service Mesh or Longhorn. This Terraform operator is super popular as well. And they all exist in this platform services layer. And then sitting on top of that, where we're really beginning to sort of enrich our story, particularly with the incorporation of the Fleet project for our GitOps at scale capabilities within Rancher 2.5. They're sitting in there. We haven't forgotten about Rio. It was launched at the end of last year, and it's been we've been sort of tracking its progress in the community. I think we're going to see really sort of interesting developments with the developer services component of the Kube cake as we go forward, particularly into the Caesar acquisition, which we hope will conclude pretty soon. So before I conclude, if you're going to go to anything this month, one of these virtual conferences that maybe you're a bit sort of jaded by, go to this one. It is going to be fantastic. It's something that we've sort of organized as computing on the edge with Kubernetes, but we're very lucky to have be working with esteemed sponsors. ARM, who we've had a fantastic relationship for a long time now, with Microsoft and AWS, these sort of hugely significant companies. We're very proud to be working with them and delivering this this conference. That if you're interested in running Kubernetes as close as possible to where it's delivering the most value, i.e. the edge, the network edge, then please join us on October the 21st. It's going to be all-day event, ET time, and you can register free on edgeconference.io. Look forward to seeing you there. And the final shameless plug for an event is next month's online meetup. It's going to be, I think Adrian's going to be doing it. He's going to be doing it with Bill, and they're going to be deep diving into the GitOps, the new GitOps capabilities within Rancher, doing a bit of a deep dive. And as always, you can register for that online meetup if you go to rancher.com/events. So that is me done. I will be manning the questions for a little while, and I will then hand over to Basil. Although Basil, I will still be I'll still be driving the slides for you. Okay.
Very well. Thanks for that whirlwind introduction, Tom. I am very happy to be here. I have been at Rancher. I did the math. This would be my 4th month at Rancher tomorrow, so I'm still drinking from the fire hose, as most people say in the industry. I started out as Vice President of Edge Solutions, and I'm transitioning into the VP of Product role, so I've got a lot on my plate. And again, very excited to participate in this meetup. This is my first Rancher meetup, and I welcome your attention and happy to share some content with you. So let's talk about the Rancher 2.5 details. We've got 4 broad areas of focus here. I'm going to start from the left side and then walk our way through. So on the data center side, we've seen tremendous amount of traction in the US public sector. And as a previous professional in that space or working in that space with those folks, we understand the stringent security requirements needed for public sector applications and cloud infrastructure in general. And so what we've decided to do with 2.5 is offer a focused set of tooling in the Kubernetes edition, the Rancher Kubernetes engine that focuses on the security requirements in that space. So we'll talk about that in a separate slide in more detail. in cloud. So Rancher's been known for quite some time as the leading multi-cloud management platform. So here, what we've done in 2.5 is we've enhanced our EKS support. So as a full first-class citizen, there are a lot of cool things that we can do in terms of full lifecycle management with EKS, and we'll talk about that in detail. And lastly, on the edge, not lastly, but on the edge side, with the traction and momentum that we're seeing with K3S being adopted, there are use cases where we have customers coming to us with thousands of nodes under management. And so we had to adjust and introduce new capabilities to manage clusters at scale. So a lot of the edge focus will be augmenting Rancher, the platform, with the ability to manage a multitude of clusters out there in the field. And so the top thing here is management. So Rancher, the product, is front and center. There's a nuance in 2.5 that has to be understood. And so before, when we installed Rancher, we had to run it on the Rancher Kubernetes engine. The nuance with 2.5 is that Rancher can now be run on anybody's CNCF certified cluster, which is wonderful. And so this concept of being able to be installed on any cluster is very powerful, because once you install Rancher as an app, so to speak, it brings along all of the full management capabilities of Rancher to that platform upon which you installed it, right? So if you decide to run Rancher on AKS, then you get all the Rancher goodness running on the infrastructure that is AKS, and including the complete lifecycle, the complete catalog that brings all of the applications and full lifecycle management of those applications to the table. So it's really powerful in that regard, and Bill's going to walk through some of the features there. But there's some enhancements around observability and logging and metrics, so that's really cool. And so it gives us a different approach to looking at Rancher from a product perspective. So Tom, if we can go to the next slide, we can talk about what I call the first-class citizenship of the support for EKS, right? So this is really cool. It took us, this is one pillar of many. Of course, there's EKS, AKS, and GKE, but today we're focused on EKS with the 2.5 release, in the sense that we can now fully manage the infrastructure that is EKS. So not only can we use the Rancher interface, so again, let's play this out, right? So we could install Rancher as an app on AKS or on-premise, wherever, as long as it's a CNCF certified distro, as I mentioned. And now we can point to Amazon and say, build me a cluster, right? And everything will fall in line. Not only can we have full lifecycle management, we can scale out, we can upgrade for clusters that we create, but we can do the same for imported clusters. So if there's an existing cluster running on EKS, we can tag it, point to it, import it, and then also fully manage that as if we were right there at the console, the Amazon's console. So this is very, very powerful. And it brings all of the Rancher goodness to the table as well, with centralized RBAC for authentication. We've got CIS scanning, and we're introducing OPA gatekeeper for policy enforcement as well. So lots of goodness there. We'll demo a little bit of this today, but we're very excited about this. From a product roadmap perspective, this is step one. In a future point release in Rancher 2.5, we're going to have the same level of capability for AKS and GKE as well. So next slide, Tom. And so I mentioned the focus on the U.S. public sector, and with this focus comes RKE Government. So a few things that we need to understand here in terms of nuance. This is actually based on upstream RKE2. So what we've done, because of the demand that's generated by the U.S. public sector, is we've taken all of the security goodness, all of our positioning, all of the hardening that we've done, and features that we've added, and we've dropped them into the RKE2 pipeline, the development flow, and we're offering this under the brand of RKE Government. So roadmap-wise, what we're going to do is continue building out our security stance and profile, making it better and better over time. And then at some point in time, we're going to bring that back into RKE2 proper, so that everybody on the commercial side as well as the public sector side can take advantage of the security enhancements that we're bringing to RKE. So today with 2.5, we are CNCF certified as a distro. We have FIPS libraries enabled, so we can meet FIPS compliant checkboxes for the US public sector space. And we're offering the containerd runtime, which is something that was demanded by some of our customers there. So overall, just to summarize here, we're taking a compliance-based approach towards security so that we can check the boxes and get the Rancher product suite and stack deployed into these very secure environments. Last thing, there's a bit of tooling that we're going to announce later that helps you deploy RKE Government in a fully disconnected environment. It's what we call in the government space on the high side, right? So we've got high side tooling that will bring Rancher up to the high side and do a complete and automated deployment of RKE. It's really cool, and we're very excited about the work that's coming down the line there. And the fourth pillar here is GitOps at scale. So we've called this from a product perspective, Rancher continuous delivery. Again, this is in reaction to the proliferation of the K3S clusters that we're seeing out in the field. So what's happening at a high level is that classically Kubernetes has been deployed either in the cloud providers, on the cloud providers infrastructure, or within a very hardened data center. So with K3S, you can actually see Kubernetes moving outside of those hardened environments into very hostile environments, right? And so from a security perspective, from a deployment and management perspective, we now have to manage these things that are out into the field. So one way that we can do this is basically taking this continuous deployment approach. This is based on an upstream project called Fleet. And so Fleet, as you can see on the diagram here, basically acts as a kind of a configuration management and RBAC management tool set. And it also manages the deployment and rollout of updates to your clusters, right? So it is based on it's loosely based on the GitOps philosophy, in that a Git repository is upstream from Fleet, okay? And what's cool here is that your clusters, as they call in, it's a pull model, as they call in for their updates, we don't have to configure like RBAC for the Git repo on each individual cluster. So we can take advantage of the native Kubernetes RBAC and grouping and such to manage those clusters. So they phone into Fleet, and then they see what's new for them coming from the authoritative source that is the Git repo. So lots of cool things here. As a side note, I saw a tweet from Darren, our CTO, who's the main software engineer behind the Fleet work here. He has done a demo where he's showcasing Fleet supporting 1 million clusters, which is pretty impressive. So I like other folks, I'm very eager to read the details in that blog. So we'll make some announcements about that when it's available. So let me just summarize the 4 pillars in 2.5. So on the front side, we've got Rancher as a management platform now being able to be installed on anybody's CNCF certified cluster. And again, the nuance is powerful because I can pick a cluster, install Rancher, and I'm bringing the entire value add that Rancher brings to the table to that infrastructure, right? And including the catalog, the apps, the monitoring, everything that you see classically in the Rancher feature set. And second, full lifecycle management of EKS. It's the #1 Kubernetes platform, and quickly following that will be full lifecycle support for AKS and GKE as well. And then our security focus is driven by government requirements. Our mission here is to quickly solve for those government requirements, maintain our momentum and traction there, and then bring that goodness back to the commercial version of RKE 2 when we release that. So it's going to be available for everybody. So we're taking a small branch, if you will, to meet those requirements, and then we're going to merge that back into the baseline product that is RKE 2. And then lastly, again, K3S is experiencing tremendous momentum, and we needed a solution to augment Rancher's platform to manage Kubernetes at scale. And so this GitOps at scale and the whole feature of Rancher continuous delivery is our answer to that. And lots of cool things going there. And our next version is going to be even better in terms of capabilities. And we're looking forward to bringing a lot of value to our customers. So that's it on the update side, and we'll turn it over to Bill for some live demos.
Okay, Tom, why don't we see if there's any questions so far? Hey, all right, we got some questions. So Srikanth says, we need better documentation for the Ember CLI and how to customize the UI. Any documentation on Ember CLI and how to docs to update the Rancher UI would be fantastic. Yeah, you're probably right. I think that no matter how much documentation exists, there can always be better documentation. One of the things, just the rate at which Rancher moves, documentation. I think we do a good job of keeping our documentation updated, but I know that it's always going to be a little bit behind. If there are specific things that you would like to see documented or things that you're having a difficult time figuring out how to do, open a GitHub issue. The docs is a public repo. So post that. That'll help us understand what specifically we're missing, and then we can create documentation that solves those needs. Bill, are you back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, hey, welcome to the webinar. It's so nice to have you here.
I've never had that happen where it just is like, no, you can't unmute.
Well, as we were saying when we were warming up, I think the GoToWebinar software was last updated in like 2001. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
All right, man, it's all you. We can hear you. We can see your screen. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Cool. So yeah, pretty excited to show you 2.5. This is the main landing page when you log in into 2.5. If you've upgraded from 2.4, it should feel very familiar to you. You'll note now on the cluster page that there's a new Explorer. In 2.4, we had a preview version of this, and in 2.5, we made it front and center and added a lot of new functionality to it. So let's take a look at that. We'll jump into this cluster here. And so this is the new cluster dashboard. Actually, before I get into the cluster dashboard, I should call out that this is now, this UI that we've known and loved since 2.0 is now affectionately known as the cluster manager. This is where you come for all things multi-cluster for provisioning and lifecycle management and all of your high-level actions and activities that will allow you to work across multiple clusters. And now when we go into our cluster, the Explorer view, this is our new dashboard that allows you to explore the entirety of Kubernetes. And so here we're landing on the new page. And what we're looking at is our overview, and you can see this is an EKS cluster, and we have our familiar capacities and measurements. And then here on the left-hand side, we've got our Explorer view, which is showing you every Kubernetes resource you have access to. So this, if you are coming in as a normal user, this list would be pared down to what you have access to. As an admin, I can see just about everything, and I have a quick, easy search tool for being able to quickly find resources. And so I can find something like endpoints, or if I wanted to, I could look for and edit now custom resources. So that was a big ask previously in our old UIs to be able to see these as operators have taken off. We really needed a way to bubble that up so that users can interact with those. And so now with this new Explorer view, you can absolutely do that. The other key thing that we've added to the Explorer view is a new catalog and experience through apps and marketplace. And this is the way Rancher is now delivering all of its tools and capabilities. And so we spent a lot of time building up new charts for monitoring, logging, Longhorn, benchmarking, everything that you've become familiar with is moving down into this apps and catalogs place. And so you'll be able to deploy these things through a nice Helm chart interface. You can see we've brought over the forms and the capabilities that we previously had. You can still add your own custom repositories, your own catalogs, and you can also see what's installed on your cluster through the catalog and through the Helm CLI, which has been a long standing request. And now you can see Helm releases in the app section for that cluster. And so what we've done, once you've installed catalogs and apps, let's actually go through and install, let's say, the logging chart. So here, there's no options to install, and it just goes in nice and plain. The new thing that we've added is as you've installed a new chart, you'll see that there's a new debug window that pops up. And so you can see what's happening as the application's being installed. And so you can watch and get a status update and see what's happening, or you can just push that down and ignore it for now. When we deploy a new application, and it's particularly anything from the Rancher catalog that has integration into Rancher, you end up getting a a dedicated UI to that cluster. And so once that's been deployed, now we can interact with something like monitoring. Here's all of the things that are part of the new monitoring, and an easy way to get at the tools and all of the dashboards that were deployed through it. So here's the new Grafana. You land on a nice new dashboard in Grafana. You see we've added a bunch of additional ones, and you note that this is deployed on an EKS cluster and it's adapted, and so it doesn't have like the etcd dashboard available. And so it gives you a nice view of everything that's on the cluster. And so if we wanted to, we can look at, say, the Kube API server and get the dashboard for that. The nice thing is now you can also, as part of your applications, deploy your service monitors or pod monitors and dashboards to visualize your own applications as well. And I'll show you what that could look like. So if I could jump over to one of my pre-configured clusters, you can see I can come to monitoring, jump into Grafana, and I've got a custom dashboard that I've deployed for my Redis cluster. And so I can see that it's been up for several hours and different statistics about that. So as a user, you can deploy and manage your own dashboards and extend and leverage the monitoring capabilities built into the platform. We've also got integration. We've updated Istio, and here's the new version of that. And we've also got our new logging overview. And so when you want to create outputs, you can easily come and quickly add your Elasticsearch, configure that with a familiar UX that we had previously. You can carry that over into the new. Under the hood, this has been rebuilt and is now leveraging FluentBit and FluentD in coordination. So we should see performance improvements across the nodes, and we've also added the ability to do some filtering. So that takes us through the cluster manager, or a high-level walkthrough of our Cluster Explorer and some of the new apps available in that. Before I jump into the next section, is there any questions that came in?
There are lots of questions about RKE Government, which I think maybe we'll leave those until the end. Adrian, have you spotted any about the Cluster Explorer?
No, I was just working from the top down. Wow, there are a lot of questions. Bill, I'll try and segment out some for the stuff that you're talking about now. So circle back with us in a few minutes.
Sounds good. Cool. So I come back up to the cluster manager. One of the key features that we're excited about is EKS full lifecycle management. And so part of the full lifecycle is the provisioning and onboarding of a cluster and managing the applications and upgrades and feeding it through the lifecycle loop. And so as part of Rancher 2.5, we've redone the way we can provision EKS clusters. You see there's two modes. There's the ability to register an existing cluster. And so if you've been provisioning EKS clusters for a while with other tooling or through the console, you can provide an API key to Rancher, and it will, if you have that API key, you can select a cluster that exists in your environment and register that cluster. And from that point on, Rancher will be able to upgrade the Kubernetes version on the control plane and manage any of the managed node groups attached to that cluster. And so that's a really powerful new feature and allows you to bring Rancher into if you want to consolidate tools into a single interface that you want to be able to manage and upgrade Rancher control plane or your EKS control planes and manage node groups, you can now do so. It gives you the same provisioning system, or if you want to provision new ones, it gives you the same provisioning system that you've used on premise with your RKE configurations as you are using in the cloud with your EKS clusters. And so, as Basil mentioned, we've started with EKS, but we do plan to expand that coverage to other hosted cloud providers over the next few releases. And so I think you'll be pretty excited about that. As part of
Bill, sorry, just a quick sort of interruption there. I think there's a relevant question that touches on that subject from Bruno, who asks, will you maintain your support for Alibaba, Huawei, and Tencent Kubernetes platform at a similar level to EKS, AKS, and GKE?
So I believe those are, I'd have to get back to you, but I believe those are part of the third-party drivers, because the drivers for container, the engine behind these components are actually one of the extension points, and so it's not currently on the list, but it is something that will continue to work in the existing frameworks, and is something we will continue to look at as we need to.
Okay, cool. All right, carry on.
All right. So once you have an EKS cluster, this one's been pre-provisioned. It usually takes a while. So if you'd like to see how the provisioning works, and there's a meetup in August that walks through that in good detail on our YouTube channel. But now I'll show. Let's jump into the EKS cluster. And so when we're deploying now, what we've added and expanded is coverage of all the tools so that they can launch onto the EKS cluster, and you have integrations here. So as I mentioned earlier with monitoring, when you look at the dashboards that are installed, they adapt accordingly, and they don't install etcd because, like the etcd dashboards, because those tools aren't present on these clusters. It's not a concern of the end user. We've also expanded our CIS benchmark scanning to include this. Out of the box, you need to do some things to get the cluster to pass or to be fully up to spec with the CIS standards. But here you can see we've got the different profiles. The EKS profile is one that you can select and then create a new scan and run that against this cluster, and then get the results, and you can see what happened and what you need to do to go remediate them. So this builds on what we did in 2.4. This has support for the 1.5 benchmark and is continuing to be enhanced throughout the 2.5x release cycle to include more flexibility in the way that these are run and the viewing mechanisms. So this is a nice EKS cluster. We do add support for all the supported versions of EKS up to 1.17, I believe, is the latest, and so that is now deployable and manageable through Rancher. So the next one that we're really excited about is continuous delivery, and so built into the platform is a new GitOps engine that can be used to deploy Kubernetes resources to all of your clusters out of the box. There's two contexts. There's the local cluster context, which you can configure the Rancher management server components plus any additional fleet component, or this is all powered by Fleet, so there's other components that you want to deploy to your other clusters. So you can have GitOps manage your GitOps if you choose to. I've got an example here with the local cluster of starting to set up and manage some of these new tools. So as part of Rancher 2.5, we've rebuilt the way that Rancher does backups. We've provided a new tool which allows you to back up Rancher, the application, on systems where we don't have access to the etcd database any longer. So this is all going through the Kubernetes API. So if you're running on an EKS or an AKS cluster, you can now successfully do backups. And these backups can be restored on any Kubernetes cluster, which simplifies your DR for Rancher because it's no longer dependent on a very similar configuration. You have more options for that restoration. So backups are very powerful, and they exist on the local cluster where the Rancher management server is running. And so what I've done here is I've defined a Git repository, which contains the source code for deploying my backup configuration. You can see if I click on this, it'll take me over to the Git repository. And so I can take a quick look at the application that I've deployed. I've got 3 separate components, one for the the custom resources, one for the application, and one to actually configure the backup. These are all defined simply in these fleet YAML files. And so I define which namespace, the Helm repo configuration, and the values I'd like to use. And so by updating that and configuring it, and then I can just map this. Let's take a look at this. So I can map this repo to a specific cluster, which is what I've done. I've mapped it to the local cluster, and then it's deployed all of these resources. I can see the status, and then if anything changes on either the local cluster or from the Git repository, they'll reconcile and inform me that of what's going on. And so if I now take a look at this, I can go to my local cluster and see that I've got Rancher backups installed, and I've configured a backup schedule through Fleet. And so now this is taking backups and running these for me every hour. Now that's one way you can use the continuous delivery system to configure the Rancher cluster. Our plans are to add more and more functionality for configuring Rancher to expose more and more functionality to through Kubernetes manifests, which will allow our continuous delivery system to configure those concepts. So projects and everything up to clusters is in scope for what we plan to do in the future. But today, it's focused on being able to deploy our applications and native concepts in the cluster. So when I want to deploy to my other applications and my other clusters and my applications, I have the ability to wire up my Git repos. I have every cluster that's registered into Rancher is automatically registered into the continuous delivery system. So I can get a list of these. You can see that there's something going on in this cluster, and I can quickly see that this needs some attention. So this is a good way that continuous delivery bubbles up anything that comes up and needs attention across your group of clusters. I also have the concept of a cluster group, which allows me to group my clusters. And so I can say this is my all group, but I can add labels when I create the clusters that then I can use here to select individual clusters. So I could label them dev test prod, I could label them by state, I could label them by region. I have a lot of flexibility, whatever works for your organization. And then here I can create these groups of these clusters in which I want to deploy applications to. And so this is a very, very powerful concept for managing a large number of clusters. And then Rancher continuous delivery will orchestrate rolling out the deployment to those. And so I do have this simple kind of hello world application that I've deployed. It is bound to a specific cluster, one of my pre-existing ones. And so if I come and look at that, you can see that I've got my namespace. I have my hello world application deployed. I can see that I got my pod. I've got my ingress. And you can see I just have a little hello world cow. And if I want to make an update to that, I can quickly So what I did was just edited the deployment manifest to change the image tag so that it will change something as a deployment. I can come back here to the cluster dashboard and see, see that my tag is updated. I can see that I've got new configurations waiting to be applied. It's in progress. And so the deployment's updating, and now it says it is ready. Now if I come back, I should see my application's now been deployed and updated. So this is a quick high level of what's currently capable in continuous delivery. We are going to have a meetup next month that's going to dive very deep into this and look at how to deploy all of the system charts that, monitoring, logging, and being able to configure the local cluster. So we'll have the good examples of managing those components, and go deep dive into the architecture of how continuous delivery is working and integrated with Rancher. So yeah, that is the high level of Rancher 2.5. Questions?
Right. So we have
You asked
quite a
for
few
it.
questions. Yeah. Wait, why don't you go ahead with the first one, Adrian?
Okay. Wow. So I was answering questions, and I'm not sure if you actually just showed this, but there have been a few questions that popped up about using Rancher and RKE now and migrating it to K3s. Did you just show the backing up Rancher from one cluster and deploying it into another, or were you showing something else? Because I totally wasn't paying attention to your demo.
No, I didn't do it live this demo, but that is
Then
that is a
can
possibility.
you just talk about that functionality?
Yeah, so in order to run everywhere, we needed to make sure that you had a safe backup and restore capability everywhere. And so we added a new backup utility to the Rancher application that you run in the local cluster. And so just if we drop down into here, you come through the apps key catalog place and you deploy the new Rancher backup tool. Once that's deployed, we have the concept of setting up scheduled backups. And so you can create these, give it a name, you create a schedule, whether you want to do one time or reoccurring. You can back up to a local volume, or you can back up to an S3 bucket or S3 compatible API. And those backups will be periodically scheduled and backed up to there. And then when you need to restore, you can take those backups, install the backup restore operator directly into that cluster, and feed it the location for the restore operation, which is just another custom resource, which basically takes the file name and where it came from. And then you can restore that to the cluster, to another cluster. Now, because of the way this is operating now, it's going through the Kubernetes API. That means all it needs is access to a new Kubernetes API. And so that enables us to move from, say, an RKE cluster to a K3s cluster or an EKS cluster if you really wanted to. But it decouples the dependency on the actual data store. So whether you're using SQL or you're using etcd, you have a way to back this up and restore it into a cluster that might be using a different backend.
Nice.
Yeah, there's quite a few questions about upgrading from 2.4 to 2.5.
Yep.
Yeah, how do I upgrade, or should I upgrade from 2.4 to 2.5? There's like 3 or 4 questions like that.
Yeah, so the upgrade from 2.4 to 2.5 is just like all of our other upgrades. You download the latest Helm chart and update your application as you have for a long time. We typically do not recommend you migrate to the newest release until the stable tag has been moved. Once it ships 2.5.0, we recommend you can start testing it and using it as sandbox, or start taking a look at it and seeing how it'll fit into your environment. And so, but after a few weeks, we move the stable tag, and then that is typically when you can start looking at using it for production workloads. The upgrade story, as I said, is 2.4 to 2.5. You upgrade and things work. Things to note in the upgrade, this is one of the first ones where we've actually started deprecating features, and you can see which features have been deprecated in the release notes. There's a new policy in the terms of service that outline what to expect, but the upgrade will not break anything. The tools you were using will allow you to upgrade into 2.5 and continue using them what we recommend in the 2.5 is that you start your migration or your cutover process to the new ones.
Okay.
There's a question about if we plan to. There's a question if we plan to integrate monitoring V2 into the cluster manager UI like V1 was. Remember when you added the advanced monitoring, it changed all of the dashboard display to show little snippets from the Prometheus Grafana. Is that a plan for this version of the UI?
There's talk. We're looking at integrating possibly a bit more touch points into the Cluster Explorer UI. We really see the Cluster Explorer taking over that cluster view, where you would drill into, in the Rancher, in the cluster manager side, that'll be mostly focused on managing across clusters, but anything that you're interacting with in the cluster or getting information about the cluster, you would drop into the Cluster Explorer. Right. And so that is the longer term plan. So yeah.
Okay.
What about this one? Any short tips on how to install Rancher 2.5 on an already existing EKS cluster?
How to install on an already existing EKS cluster. The install docs for Rancher have they're broken out in the stage where installing on an existing or installing Rancher onto a Kubernetes cluster is the section to follow there. It's a Helm chart.
So because Rancher 2.5 installs into any Kubernetes cluster, it's not a requirement that EKS be deployed by Rancher in any way. You can install Rancher into EKS, AKS, GKE, K3S, anywhere. That's correct, right, Bill?
That is correct. Yep.
So there you go. So how do you do it? You just do it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody asks if we will be maintaining our support for Alibaba, Huawei, and Tencent Kubernetes platforms the way that we do right now. Actually, a question from Bruno.
I think I actually asked that one earlier on. Sorry, I should have. I should have unticked that. My mistake. Sorry, mate.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm only able to either focus on the questions or focus on the responses. So disregard.
No problem. Let's go for. There's a good one I found here. So while updating to Rancher 2.5, I discovered a new local cluster. Can you please tell us something about that and the use of this local cluster? That's from Detlef Lampard.
Yeah. So the local cluster has always been there. Rancher has always required you to run on a Kubernetes cluster. There was a flag to hide it previously. I believe that's been removed in 2.5. But basically, Rancher is a Kubernetes application, and so it is running on the cluster, and it automatically imports the cluster that it is running on and calls it the local cluster. The reason for that is we previously, we could manage a lot of the downstream clusters, but as we've added more and more functionality and have moved in the direction of embracing Kubernetes, we actually we need a place to install these tools. So for instance, the EKS provisioner is the way we've done that is it's actually its own operator that deploys into the local cluster, and we interact with that through Kubernetes resources. So because we're starting to expand and build everything in a Kubernetes native way, we need access to that local cluster. Also, in order to run Rancher everywhere, that also includes the cluster Rancher is running on, and sometimes only that cluster. So making that a first-class way to run, it was also one of the main reasons we brought that out. Yeah, the local cluster is the cluster that's running the Rancher control plane and the UI, and so now you can interact with that directly through the UI. There's other things to read about. There's a new administrative role that is created that controls which access you can gain from that to that cluster from Rancher, and that's all documented in the release notes.
Cool. Jeff asks if CIS benchmark scanning is still only available for RKE clusters, or if that has been expanded to support other types of Kubernetes clusters.
That has been expanded. I just, in the demo earlier, I was showing the CIS scanning running on an EKS cluster. We've upgraded to the 1.5 version of the benchmark, brought that over to RKE. There's a profile now for, let's just quickly go look. Switch over to, so we've added profiles. We've added the vanilla upstream kubebench CIS 1.5, so just the plain unmodified version. The EKS and GKE profiles have been, they created, both Google and Amazon created CIS benchmarks that are specific to their hosted providers. So we've included those. And then we have the 2 RKE profiles that we've had previously. So we are expanding this and continue to make improvements on that.
We are getting inundated with questions. So if you ask a question, if you ask a question and it's like, how do I do this, or can you demo that, we're not going to be able to show or even address those. But if you have specific questions about the capabilities of Rancher 2.5 or further explanation about something that Bill has explained, then please feel free to ask. But we're not going to be able to answer everybody's question in the time that we have left.
So I think this is a good one from Andrew Chirello. I hope that's the right pronunciation. His question is, will we be able to manage the new apps for monitoring, logging, etc. via the Terraform provider?
Yes.
Oh, we put Bill on the spot.
Yeah, I have to look.
Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, no, that one.
Like very quickly asking a question in Slack to the engineering team.
Yeah, if it makes sense, I think we will add support for those into the new into the provider. I'm not. Yeah, I'd have to double check to see what we're doing for the new home charts and the catalog apps.
Okay. Have you found a good one?
Yeah, Adriano is asking if the new Rancher monitoring incorporates the Rancher authentication to control access to the Grafana dashboards.
There's no integration with the Rancher authentication, no. Users that have access to the cluster get a read-only view to the Grafana, and then through just the normal mechanisms of the Prometheus operator, you can set an administrative password to that. That said, the operator has multiple modes of operation for adding dashboards, and so if you use by default, we deploy it with the config map implementation. So you deploy dashboards based on config maps. You can configure, who has access to create those config maps, and as an admin, you can configure where you look for those config maps that contain dashboards. So there's some flexibility in how you can control that, but everyone gets a read-only view.
Cool. Okay. I've got a question here from Patrick Candazuria. I hope that's the right pronunciation. That's quite a challenging one, at least for me, being an Englishman and terrible with other languages. Do you support vCloud? I've seen you support VMware. Let's say I need to provision 7 VMs on vCloud and use Rancher to install Kubernetes on those VMs. Do I need to look after the VMs, or does Rancher take care of that?
So Rancher integrates with vSphere and can provision VMs directly through the vSphere API. If you want to do, if there's an API that doesn't exist, or if we don't have a node driver support for that, the recommended approach is to go custom, where you would provision the VMs and bring them up to a point where they're running Docker and run the Rancher registration command. import them into Rancher, and from that point on, Rancher will manage the Kubernetes version and configuration. And you'll be able to do centralized auth and all of the things that Rancher brings, but the VM management components would need to be done through another tool.
Okay.
Here's a question from Roberto. Roberto wants to know if the continuous delivery and fleet functionality is replacing Rancher pipelines.
Yes, the Rancher pipelines is marked for deprecation. Yeah, you can do delivery and deployment through the new Rancher continuous delivery.
Great.
Here's a question from Erwin Williamson. I think it's a sort of, I often sort of get people asking this actually. Is there a catalog of all apps available for Rancher somewhere on the web?
Is there?
So I guess that's outside of the catalog in the app itself, I think is what he's on. It's like an index of them.
So the way that it works behind the scenes is you can see the apps that are provided in a Rancher install through the GitHub repository. It's on the Rancher org under charts, and then in the 2.5 branch. Those are the apps that ship with Rancher 2.5. Now, under the hood and behind the scenes, you can add any Helm repository to that. So, I mean, it's not limited to anything in particular. So, if I wanted to, I can add here. I can give it either just a Helm repository. So I can probably just do. I forget what it was, but well, hold on. Let me see. So if I add this, I can just create this, and so now when I come to my available charts, all of these applications will add. So basically you can add any Helm repository to it. And so whether that comes from like one of our partners, JFrog on the Chart Center, or if you want to use the public Helm index and add those repositories, there's no longer really the centralized Helm. It's not one list anymore. They've moved into sort of aggregating multiple repositories and for various reasons. And so it just needs a valid Helm chart repository to be added. We also still support the Git model that we have had catalogs prior to this as well in Rancher. It still supports that format.
Yeah, and there's kind of a related question, at least relating to the app catalog from Rajesh. He says, does Rancher remediate vulnerabilities in the images in the app marketplace? Is this question?
It depends. We scan the images that we build and manage. Some images we just mirror and we mark those as part of the images text. So it depends, but we are, the integrations, the direct Rancher supported integrations are things that we have more control over and flexibility in the ones that we build. And then partners, those are maintained primarily by the vendor of the application. We certify that it deploys and works on Rancher. So it's, we look to them to manage their images.
So this one's not a question, but I'm just going to read it out anyway. This is from Brian, and he says, this is not a question. The Rancher backup feature is the absolute best feature ever. Thank you. You have no idea how this change alone makes my life a whole lot better. There you go.
Exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's just such a great comment to get from the audience. Thank you very much.
So next one, how can we remove old logging to be uploaded to a new logging setup on the Rancher, I think he means 2.5 interface? That's from Adriano.
Yeah, the migration or the switch is kind of a hard switch. It is shut one off and turn the other on. That is the current workflow for those.
Okay. All right. Adrian, have you got one?
There's an interesting question here from Jonas, which I'm going to throw out there because so Jonas says, I want to build 1,000 far edge on private network clusters for 5G. And his question is, are there Rancher K3s cluster Terraform templates using GitOps? And I'm not sure if that question is like, does our GitOps solution support Terraform or so yeah, so his question, are there any Rancher K3s cluster Terraform templates using GitOps? I'm throwing that out there because I think that we might be able to answer that by saying, if he wants to deploy 1,000 far edge on a private network cluster for 5G, how could he use Fleet to do that? Or should he just join the upcoming continuous delivery specific meetup? Or do you have a better answer?
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's two separate paths. There's the provisioning of the Rancher components through Terraform, and then plumbing everything to work downstream and wiring that up, and then sort of handing off control to the continuous delivery Fleet interfaces. At a high level, that would be sort of what I would envision. But I mean, it'd be good to either get more details and unpack that, or maybe in the Slack channel. Be kind of interested to understand a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good one. Actually, going back to the backups, is Rancher backup only available on 2.5, or can we use it with 2.4.8? That's from John Lee.
It's currently only supported in 2.5.
Okay. Cool. How are you getting on, Adrian? Have you seen a good one?
Yeah, we're to the point where the questions are becoming a little bit less specific because we've already gone through all the specific ones. So I'm trying to do like some preliminary investigation before I ask them.
Hey, Adrian, there's one about EKS and then basically equivalent functionality for vSphere. Let me mark it.
Since you're looking at it, why don't you read it out? Whose question is it?
Jean-Philippe Labatture.
Oh, very nicely done, Basil.
That was impressive. Very impressive. Much better than me. Go on.
So I see the new full lifecycle management with EKS clusters and for existing EKS clusters. Any plan to add that functionality to vSphere clusters? Meaning having an RKE cluster running on vSphere and importing it to Rancher and be able to fully use the vSphere node driver and fully manage that cluster from Rancher instead of from a custom driver.
I mean, that's an interesting use case. I don't know that we haven't set anything in stone to take a look at that, but that's something we can consider thinking about.
Right. This one's from Martin. Can you control Rancher using GitOps? That's Martin Borgman.
I was just about to type a reply to that one, but you took it.
Okay, all right.
That's Inception, isn't it?
That's the vision, and the goal is to provide that interface for managing Rancher itself through Kubernetes manifests, which would allow it to be managed via GitOps. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a command line somewhere that has to run something, but handing as much of that off to automation as possible is a key goal, and we recognize that the demand for that, and we're making steps in that direction. So, like I said, being able to install the new catalog apps through the Helm chart repositories was a big step. All of the monitoring, logging tools, the custom resources that drive those are all available to the user to manipulate. And it all just feeds into this general goal and desire to make sure that we feed into the automation systems that our users want to embrace.
I've got another one here. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Istio integration? I guess that means the existing Istio capabilities and their enhancements in 2.5. That's from Francois Leduc.
Yeah, so in 2.5 we've got support for Istio 1.7, and from the time we integrated Istio originally to now has been quite the journey. The Istio project has been moving super fast, and they really pivoted hard in their installation path and their method. They originally had a Helm chart that we were embracing, but then they moved away from that in favor of the operator. And so the approach we took with that, and they didn't necessarily put in an upgrade path, I think, in one of the versions. So like there became kind of a hard switch. But the path we took with the operator model is we've actually wrapped the deployment of the operator into a Helm chart. And so what you're able to do, if we can take a quick look. So what you're able to do now is, you can pick the different components, but we've exposed this capability of the overlay. So Istio, for installation, you deploy the operator, and then there's a new command line utility, and you can feed it config files, and so that's what these overlays are. So if you want to expand on top of what's already being deployed by default, and you want to add multiple ingress gateways, or you want to take advantage of egress gateways, or you want to take advantage of other components, you can, whatever is definable through these overlay files, you can now feed one in. The nice thing about that is it's now versioned and part of your deployment, so you can roll back, roll forward, through the Helm release mechanism. So, yeah, and as part of the upstream project, they started streamlining what's shipped as part of Istio proper and what's now considered an external package. So we deployed Istio, and we've added Kiali in as well. So when we go to the UI for Istio, it is, you can see that there's the Kiali dashboard is now deployed. You can jump into that and get a quick overview of what's going on in your cluster through that UI. And then each of the custom resources has its own UX, and so you can come and manage and create from YAML the Istio integration. So that's what's been done. We continue to work on it, and that's Istio in 2.5.
All right, we have 2 more questions. I'm sure more will come through, but at the moment there's only 2 left. One of them, and again, I apologize if you said this and I wasn't paying attention. I know that in Rancher 2.4 there were the Rancher app catalog was separate from Helm, and people were not able to see apps deployed via the Helm command line and vice versa. Has that been resolved in 2.5?
So I think in 2.5 or 2.4, I think what's being referred to is when you came in and deployed something like monitoring or our logging integrations, the Helm options were not exposed. And so in 2.5, that's handled differently. There are still system level charts that aren't necessarily bubbled up to the user. There's a dependency management system for custom resources, for instance, that exist, but the user doesn't necessarily need to concern themselves with. But yeah,
I think the question is actually, if somebody installs an app via Helm install on the command line, will they see it show up under the list of installed apps in the Rancher UI, and vice versa?
Yes.
There you go.
Yep.
It's a much easier answer.
Yep. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
That's cool. I just didn't ask it well enough. Okay. The almost last question now. When using Fleet, so you may not be able to answer this. I haven't encountered this myself, but I'm here to ask the questions. When using Fleet and importing clusters, this is from Abel, is there a way to preserve the project of an imported cluster? And he says all existing clusters get imported into Fleet minus the project. Do you know what he's referring to?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So Abel, if you can add a little bit more detail to that question and ask it differently, we'll try and throw it back at Bill.
There's a question that's just come in from Harald. Is tracing with Jaeger still part of Rancher 2.5?
It's not deployed by default at the moment. It is something we're looking at adding back in.
Okay. And then there's this question here, another Terraform question. I'm not sure that we can necessarily answer it. Well, we'll see. I understand that the Rancher provider for Terraform is written by HashiCorp, not Rancher. Do you see their provider as keeping up sufficiently with Rancher enhancements? That's from Frank.
It is. So actually, the Rancher 2 Terraform provider is maintained by Rancher Engineering, and we're HashiCorp technology partners, and yeah, I think we do a good job of keeping up with it.
Okay. I think. Oh, here we go. Oh no, we've got one more. Oh, okay. No, we haven't. No, sorry, my mistake. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's it. Great.
We need to rename these meetups to like something like, you know, putting Bill in the hot seat or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So should we sort of wind up a little bit? Just a sort of quick reminder. Two last things. The Computing at the Edge conference coming up on October the 21st. Be there. Starts at 10 a.m. ET. Go to edgeconference.io. It's being sponsored by ARM, Microsoft, AWS, and Rancher. And then the next month's meetup is about the GitOps functionality, the continuous or the powered functionality for Rancher continuous delivery. Somebody actually pointed out in the questions that event hasn't been posted yet. We'll try and get that posted up on the website tomorrow so you guys can sign up for it. But I think that's probably it. Thanks again for joining. Lots of you stay until the end. It's very, very flattering to see that. Thank you so much. It's been great fun, amazing questions. And I hope you found it a useful sort of hour and a half or whatever it's been. And have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone. Take care.